Hello everyone, and welcome to my ranking of the 8 cups in Mario Kart DS. My video from last week has over 600 views already, so thank you guys. I think you appreciate me actually narrating these videos and providing my opinion a little bit more in depth, so I'm going to do the same thing here. So without further ado, let's begin. At number 8 we have the Banana Cup. This is definitely one of the most underwhelming collections of tracks you can find in a Mario Kart game. I don't actually think any of the tracks from this cup are flat out awful, but they're all pretty bad to mediocre. It starts out with SNES Donut Plains 1, which I actually consider the best track in this cup. That says a lot. Next is N64 Frappe Snowland, which is another sort of mediocre track. It's not terrible, but it's certainly forgettable. The track design, the music, basically everything. After that is GBA Bowser Castle 2, which is just so derpy. And I've said this before, but it bears mentioning again, they screwed up the music so bad. Finally, there's GCN Baby Park, which is nowhere near the chaotic and fun track it is in Double Dash. After all, there's only 5 laps. What? Overall, this Banana Cup probably wouldn't even get a seal of approval from Donkey Kong. Okay, I had to make at least one awful joke. On to the next cup. At number 7, we have the Mushroom Cup. The Mushroom Cup usually isn't one of my favorites because it usually starts with easy, simple tracks. That way, beginners can get into the game, so that's fair. But this cup started with a track that is one of the most pathetic excuses for a track in Mario Kart history, in my opinion. Figure 8 circuit literally has no atmosphere except like a cheering crowd, a bridge, and that's it. Mario Kart is supposed to be exciting, there's supposed to be detail and track creativity, unlike a lot of racing games. Mario Kart is just supposed to be fun and vibrant and colorful, but Figure 8 Circuit is dull and boring and lifeless. It's just super lazy. Yoshi Falls is the next one, and it gets a lot of hate, but it's certainly better than Figure 8 Circuit. It's also a fairly simple track, but the atmosphere is 10 times better. With Cheep Cheep Beach, we continue to get better. It's a track with a relaxing atmosphere, music, pretty okay design. Overall, kind of forgettable though. And it finishes with Luigi's Mansion. Pretty cool track that you get to ride through the mansion, the woods. Those trees are just kind of weird, man. Anyway, the Mushroom Cup isn't terrible overall, but Figure 8 Circuit kind of brought it down here, so yeah. At number 6, we have the Shell Cup. Similarly with the Mushroom Cup, this cup usually contains some of the more simple tracks. That's no different here. It begins with the very first Mario Kart track ever, SNES Mario Circuit 1. It's a pretty solid remake, and I like the DS-styled redo of the music. N64 Moo Moo Farm was another track where the music remake sounded good. It was another fairly simple track, but a fun one with a good atmosphere. Then we get to GBA Peach Circuit, which kinda ruins what was a pretty decent Shell Cup so far. The Peach Circuit's ridiculously simple, and like Figure 8 Circuit, has virtually no atmosphere or track details or anything like that. The track is ridiculously short and not much effort was put into it in my opinion. The cup concludes with GCN Luigi Circuit. Not a bad remake, but seriously Shell Cup, 3 out of 4 tracks he chose are circuits, come on. At number 5, we have the Leaf Cup. It starts out quite poorly with one of my least favorite retro remakes in Mario Kart history, SNES Koopa Beach 2. The track design is just as derpy as in the SNES version, the dark blue lakes are just as annoying, and the music doesn't do it for me. But After Koopa Beach is one of the best tracks in this entire game. It's a remake of the awesome N64 Choco Mountain. This track is super fun, and the music was already catchy in the N64 version, but it got even more catchy here. GBA Luigi Circuit is yet another circuit track, as the title suggests, but it's redeemed by the fact that it's a lot less boring than most of the other circuit tracks in this game. The cup concludes with GCN Mushroom Bridge, which is kind of a shell of the GameCube version, unfortunately. The atmosphere, the music, it just definitely isn't the same as playing Double Dash. Overall, the Leaf Cup has one really good track, one really bad one, and 2 that are kinda in the middle. At number 4, we have the Lightning Cup. Now we're getting into the good stuff. This is the first cup to feature 2 really good tracks, but first let's talk about a bad one. The cup begins with SNES Choco Island 2, another very annoying and boring track with mediocre music. All is forgiven when the next track is N64 Banshee Boardwalk though, another one of my favorites from this game. The eerie music, restless atmosphere, and giant fish dude make this quite an interesting track. Next up is another great retro track, arguably the best one from this entire game, which is Sky Garden. I don't think I even need to talk again about how freaking catchy that music is. Then you have GCN Yoshi Circuit. Doesn't look as great when it's now been made in HD, but it's still a pretty solid remake. It's certainly a better circuit track than a lot of the other choices in this game. So overall, the Lightning Cup is pretty solid besides Choco Island 2. At number 3, we have the Special Cup. The Special Cup usually is quite special, as it contains some of the more complex tracks for Mario Kart pros to enjoy. There's always the iconic Bowser's Castle and Rainbow Road and all of the newer Mario Kart games in the Special Cup. So what does this Special Cup have in store? It starts with a neat dirt bike track known as Wario Stadium. Perhaps I'd like that track even more if I didn't think of it as Waluigi Pinball Light. After all, they share the same music. After that is Peach Gardens, a very pretty track with a great atmosphere. The Bowser's Castle is where I get a bit underwhelmed. It's definitely not one of my favorites in this series. Fortunately, the Rainbow Road is quite good. It's also not one of my favorites in the series, but it's still definitely one of the better tracks in this game. Honestly, the music in that track is really good. It just gets overshadowed by some of the better Rainbow Road themes. So overall, the Special Cup gets a seal of approval from me. At number 2, we have the Flower Cup. We might as well first talk about the track that kept this whole cup out of number 1, which would be Desert Hills. It's such a bland, boring, and typical desert track that doesn't really do anything unique. And it's a shame because the rest of this cup is great. Delfino Square, that needs no introduction. What an amazing track. Waluigi Pinball, it's only my favorite track in this entire game, no big deal. You know, what a shocker coming from someone who named their channel after Waluigi. The uniqueness, track design, atmosphere, and music of Waluigi Pinball will forever live on in Mario Kart lore. And the cup doesn't end with a bad track either. Shroom Ridge is quite underrated. It's a pretty typical highway track, but the atmosphere and music are quite nice. All in all, if you replace Desert Hills with an average track like Cheap Cheap Beach, for instance, this cup would easily be number 1 on my list. But unfortunately, Desert Hills held it back. So instead, at number 1, we have the Star Cup. Basically, 3 out of the 4 tracks here are in my top 10 for this game, and the one that isn't in my top 10 isn't as bad as Desert Hills. That's what got the Star Cup the number 1 spot. And the Star Cup, it usually lives up to its name. It is a star. Not to spoil anything, but the Star Cup made it very high on my ranking of the Mario Kart Wii and Mario Kart 8 Cups ranking. Anyway, the cup starts out with the underrated DK Pass. With its great item shortcut, lively music, and cool uphill climb, this track always puts a smile on my face. Unless I get hit by the snowman. Then there's Tick-Tock Clock. I've always been a little critical of it, but I won't deny that it's pretty freaking good. Mario Circuit is where we get to the Med track, but it's really not that bad for a Mario Circuit. It has that piranha plant in the middle, the track design is pretty good, but what is Mario Circuit doing in the Star Cup exactly? I'm glad that Mario Kart Wii has sort of set a precedent that it's in the Flower Cup instead. So finally, you conclude with Airship Fortress, my second favorite track behind Waluigi Pinball. The music, the atmosphere, the cannon launch, it's also epic. So overall, this Star Cup lives up to its name. Bye bye.